Hi, curious friends. Welcome to Building Your Best Brain podcast. If you're watching this on video, you'll notice that my background is quite different and, yes, a lot less aesthetic. Some of you may know this, some of you may not, but I'm from Montreal, and right now we have a public transit strike. And so I had two options, either to wait till the strike is over, which will be at the end of the month, apparently. I mean, we all know how strikes work, to be able to record in a little corner in my apartment that is a lot more beautiful, or to bring my equipment with me to the lab, find the abandoned microscope room, and record there. And I decided to do this because, which is why the background is the way it is, because what I have to share today is really important and it's something that I wanted to get across before the holiday season, because I know the holiday season is inherently full of stressors, right? We're kind of coming up to the end of the year. There's often a lot of deadlines at the end of the year related to work. There's often things around finances, right? As we're coming to gifts and food and bringing family together, and then of course family in itself has its own stressors. And I'm honestly not sure what I'm going to title this episode yet, but basically, I want to talk about when it feels like something is missing when it comes to regulating your stress. So, if you're somebody that, has done the tools, right, has their own practices, whether it's, therapy, journaling, breath work, meditation. You may even be on different medications, whether that's supplements or, you've seen a psychiatrist or a family doctor, and you're feeling like something's not quite right. That it's almost like a bit of whack-a-mole, right? Like kind of your stress comes up, you whack it down with something, and then something else pops up. You whack it down with something else pops up, you whack it down. And that it's kind of this never-ending sea of just trying to regulate your stress without feeling like you're making a lot of momentum forward. Because of course, stress regulation is something that we do every day, but in doing it every day, it does rewire our brain to become more resilient to stress. Resilient being that it's able to come back to a balanced place, that you're able to come back to yourself, your most resourced self, to manage. But if you're feeling like, you're doing all the things and it is helping temporarily, but you're not making that momentum forward, the piece that you're likely missing is what I like to call the core circuit. And this is something that, with the clients that I take through Fire and Rewire, which is a 4-month brain training program that I'll talk about a little bit later, basically looks to address that core circuit. And this core circuit, so a circuit being a group of cells in your brain, basically you only have 1, 2, maybe 3 core circuits that fire when we're facing stressors. They're all kind of getting redirected to these 2, 3 core circuits. And these are either inherent beliefs or thoughts you have. And if you don't know what those are, then you're going to be constantly playing kind of whack-a-mole with your stress symptoms. Now, stick with me. I will share the science behind all of it and how it logically makes sense, but sometimes it's hard for us to wrap our head around how powerful our thoughts and beliefs can be, because they feel intangible, right? And we can't like point to anywhere in our body, and we can't really point to anywhere exactly in our brain, sort of, as to where the source of it is. But the reality is that if we have a core circuit, like a core belief that is constantly firing every time we come up against a stressor, it's going to remain strong. It's going to remain strong. Again, cells that fire together, wire together, meaning that, after high frequency stimulation, it doesn't take much for it to fire. And you're always going to produce that same physiological response at the level of your brain and the level of your body, right? And doing this over time is what creates a lot of the sickness that we experience. And this is because, every time this circuit gets fired, we have a specific neural signature in our brain, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But of course, with our stress response, we're releasing chemicals, whether that's cortisol, whether that's noradrenaline, and it's binding to specific organs and tissues in our body. And over time, our body's going to begin to adapt to those new high levels in a way that, temporarily is advantageous, right? So it's beautiful that our body can do this, because when our body can do this, we're able to withstand high levels of these chemicals floating around in our body. But when it's chronic, and so when it happens for longer periods of time, we're basically making that out of balance state our new normal, and our body physically cannot operate there for a long time without diseases showing up, whether that's mental health disorders, whether that's metabolic disorders, whether that's different cancers, right? And that's that whole stress being linked to a lot of different diseases. And of course, stress regulation helps, but really looking at the core circuit that is essentially the source of all your stress and being able to rewire it is what makes that lasting impact and that momentum that your brain and body can carry forward. And so, what I'll share with you today is some real life examples on how this core circuit can show up to everyday stress, to kind of help you figure out what does it actually mean to have a core circuit, and how is the core circuit actually showing up every day. I'll then share some of the neural signatures that I'm noticing with my brain training clients, and how in shifting this circuit, as well as applying brain training using EEGs, we can really speed up the process of basically reducing the strength of that circuit and start to build different ones. That's that momentum that we're talking about, right? Being able to redirect that brain energy to create a new core circuit, right? A core circuit that comes up when you're stressed or is more like your normal baseline. So being able to rewire for that resilience in a way that is helping your body stay healthier. And then I think I do this every episode, I will give a bit of homework to help you start identifying what those core circuits may be for you. The Fire and Rewire program is a 4-month program, and basically the first month is to identify what those core circuits are. If we don't know what those core circuits are, then there's no way in hell we can begin to change them. And so an example of a core circuit that I want to share, which may or may not be my core circuit, is around not doing enough. And so I have a core circuit where I'm not doing enough in terms of actions to, and it's a bit different for everyone. Everyone's core circuit is slightly different, but mine is around doing enough to be successful. And at one point, and this has shifted a lot, doing enough to receive unconditional love from others or to receive love from others. Now, the way this was showing up for me was I, of course, was constantly doing a lot to relieve my anxiety, right? So I had this kind of perception that if I did enough, if I outdid this person, that person, their dog, that I would be able to have those things that would make me feel safe and secure, right? Whether that was a job or a raise or a relationship, right? My partner won't leave me if I do the most for them. if I do a good job at my degree, then it means that I'm smart and I'll be successful. If I do a good job at work, right, doing the most, that they'll never fire me out. You know what I mean? So that core circuit was guiding a lot of my behaviors. And a lot of these behaviors, so it can happen in a few ways, right? But you can have a core circuit that guides you in how you behave in the world. And how I was behaving was, putting myself last, putting my body last. And I did that enough and enough and enough, where I had basically these endless cycles of burnout where, I would do the most, crash, do the stress regulation to recover, and then repeat it all over again. And this physically wore down my body a lot. This led me to the psychiatrist's office. This led to a lot of really detrimental symptoms physically. And so a core circuit in that example can really show up in how you behave in the world. Another thing that it can do is it can really impact your perception. And this is basically your brain's filtration system as you're kind of scanning and you're out in the world and you're interpreting, right? If somebody says something to you, what that means about you, or, if you achieve something or receive something, how that comes in, because it's stimulating that core circuit of I'm not doing enough, right? And so there's a few interesting examples of this. If you're in this example of not doing enough, when you achieve a big milestone, like for example, for me in my master's, when I published a paper, I did not feel proud of myself. I did not feel like I added value to the world or that I was successful. I felt a little bit of relief, and the relief was not like a great feeling. It was more just like, thank God that I don't have to like put any more work into this. And then I felt the same level of stress. And so that perception, right, of that accomplishment, right? There could very well be somebody else, right, who has a different core circuit to me that maybe interprets that as like, oh, that's incredible. That means that I can easily do it again. Or they're maybe in that situation and they're like, wow, like one is not enough. I have to get more, right? So it's that idea that we can experience the same physical accomplishments, but interpret them super, super differently. And that's based off of the core circuit that we have. This can also happen when you're interacting with people, when you're in a conversation with people, right? So this is really important when it comes to relationships you have at work, relationships you have with your family, with your partner, that, they could say something and it could have a million different interpretations. And this is because of the core circuit, right? So even when people say positive things, right? I wonder if you've ever experienced where your partner maybe gives you a compliment, and in the back of your mind, you're like, they don't really mean that, right? Or like, like that seemed kind of like half-ass. I don't think that they fully buy what they're saying. And of course, it can also happen if you interpret something as overly negative, right? Like if you're getting feedback at work, right, that is critical in the sense that, maybe they would like you to try something else or go a different direction, or they have a suggestion. Instead of maybe taking it as it is, right, which is just a suggestion to do something differently based off of their experience and, their perceptions, right, you take it personally. I mean, who has that ever happened to where you take feedback personally? That would be me. And so a part of that is, a core circuit, right? And, some people may take that same feedback and go, okay, like I'll think about it, and feel rather neutral about it. Or some people might get angry, and it's not so much that they take it personally, like, oh, they think I'm stupid. Maybe they go like, oh, that's so annoying. You're such an idiot. Like, my way is the best way. Like, how could they even, how could they even suggest something different? And so that's again that core circuit that is firing. And so this circuit, right, is basically trying to detect threats for you to keep you feeling safe. So this circuit is likely something that came out of childhood or young adulthood. It's had a lot of time to strengthen. And it was placed there, right? It was formed, it was created to keep yourself safe. And to keep yourself safe in that circuit is basically to keep you hyper vigilant, right? To address whatever threats might be around you. And so through stimulating this circuit, you're basically telling your brain that we're under attack, there is a threat, and we need to be on high alert. And that's why when your stress symptoms show up, right, whether that's shallowness of breath, digestion issues, or when you feel your stomach drop, or when you get hot, or your skin breaks out, and of course, longer term, right, that can turn into, like I mentioned before, right, different diseases and sickness. It was put there for a reason to keep you safe, especially when your brain is in the process of developing, right? It's more plastic, it can create more circuits, it can strengthen circuits more easily, have more connections. It's essentially can be on all the time without you necessarily noticing it. And so before I get into how do we identify this circuit, and there's a few different ways you can do it. And in the Fire and Rewire program, I personalize each tool for each month, but the first month is to be able to identify and understand the circuit. So bringing awareness and kind of getting a sense of where it's coming from so that we can begin to change it. What I do with Fire and Rewire clients is we often do a brain activity map first. So in combination with all the tools, they get an at-home EEG device to help train a specific brainwave in a specific region. And so it's an EEG that connects to Bluetooth on an app on your phone called the Dive app, and it gives neurofeedback. So basically, if we're looking to increase, let's say, alpha wave, for example, the music will play and it'll get louder the more you increase that alpha wave, and then it'll get quieter as alpha wave decreases. So you're basically knowing in real time what your brain is doing to help train it. But I do an activity map this is only really available for people in Montreal because it's not virtual. The training, though, however, is virtual. You can measure every single brain wave in 4 areas and what happens when you open your eyes, close your eyes, open them again, and do a cognitive task. And what I find with people that experience high levels of stress, of burnout, that are having difficulty regulating their emotions, and that have tried a bunch of stuff, but it feels like something is missing. People who struggle with sleep as well often have this. It's stuff at the back of their brain. There's specific brain waves that are supposed to increase when we close our eyes, and in particular, our slow brain waves. So that would be our alpha, for example, which is involved in relaxation, reflection. Theta is a big one that I'm noticing for a lot of people, which is an even slower brainwave. This helps us it's often a brainwave that increases right before we go to sleep, or kind of as we wake up from sleep, if everything is operating in a healthy way. And it's associated with getting into that twilight state, dreamlike state, kind of subconscious state, or even a flow state. And then, of course, there's delta, which is your sleep brainwave, which is your slowest brainwave. And for these, what I find for a lot of people is that when their eyes close, that brainwave does not increase. And in some people, it actually starts to decrease. And so at the back of your brain, right, which is harder to access consciously, right? Like we have our frontal lobe, right, and that has a lot to do with our executive functions, our cognition, decision making, and we're a lot more aware of kind of the firing that's happening here. We're a lot less aware of the firing towards the back of our brain. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't play a role in how the rest of our brain is operating. Because what I see a lot is that people will have, it'll be difficult for them to increase that slow brainwave at the back of their brain. And it doesn't surprise me based off of the physical symptoms that they tell me related to sleep, burnout, stress, lack of emotional regulation, that even at the front of their brain, I find that's where the slow brain waves are. And to me, that shows a fatigue, right? Of like, kind of operating, having lots of energy and signaling in the front, right? And basically not feeling safe and secure in the back. For when your eyes close, you allow those slow brain waves to increase. And really, the way that has been increasing for these people is through brain training, but it's through identifying the core circuit, because basically, when you're able to see what it is that is causing your stress, because it's interesting, right? It's so easy to be like, well, work is causing my stress, my partner is causing my stress, my kids causing my stress, and that's okay, right? Like, there's definitely some truth to that, but it's causing stress because it's stimulating that core circuit, and that core circuit is causing you to be in a perpetual state of stress and threat because it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel safe to not do so. And so a big part of actually having tools that are going to work consistently and you'll actually start building momentum with is figuring out what is that operating circuit that is keeping me in a perpetual state of stress and threat. What is it? What is it? So that I can start to change it in a meaningful way. And at the level of my brain, which I've seen with a lot of my clients, right, that brain wave starts to increase. And they start to notice that they're feeling better. And, it's not even that they've had to change a ton of things drastically, right? It's a lot of just small tweaks. But a lot of them, like, they go to yoga, a lot of them meditate already, a lot of them are in therapy or have tried therapy, and all those things are more effective now because they've addressed the main source of their stress. And that when stress comes their way now, it's not stimulating that circuit in the same way. And they're able to move through it and come back to a balanced place in a way that makes them stronger and not in a way that damages them. So, a way to begin to address what those core circuits may be is begin to identify how they show up every day. And so, there'll be a link in my show notes of a table. It'll just be a PDF table that you can start filling out. And the exercise is to begin to pick a couple, like maybe one, two, three, four, either thoughts, judgments, or behaviors that you notice yourself thinking or doing during the day. And so you'll kind of take note of it, and then saving it for the end of your day, you'll begin to unpack it into these different columns. And some of those columns are, okay, so like, what's the thought, the judgment, or behavior? What sparked you to have this thought, judgment, or behavior? What's the underlying fear associated with it? What is the origin of this thought, fear, or judgment, right? So for example, maybe I had a behavior, right, around, if I'm going back to the, I'm not doing enough to be successful, I had a behavior where, I was an hour late meeting a friend, let's say, because I had to fit in one more experiment for the paper. That fear, right, the fear underneath that was that I wasn't going to do enough to be successful. So I had that compulsion that I had to do that. I had to do that experiment and be late for my friend because I had to be successful. And, the origin of that is that somewhere along the path of little Sylvie growing up to bigger Sylvie, to adult Sylvie, is that I felt like I had to be successful in order to get unconditional love, whether that was from family, whether that's from friends, that, if I am successful, then I'll have unconditional love. And there's a few other kind of columns like that, but like identifying your emotion around it, but being able to see how it shows up in your behaviors, thoughts, and judgments, what the underlying fear is, and the origin. Doing that exercise for 3 or 4 weeks, you'll see very, very clear themes emerge. And that's going to be a huge step forward in figuring out, okay, how can I dismantle this so I can actually regulate my stress in a way that's going to propel me forward? And it's not going to be an endless circle of just like whack-a-mole, all my stress symptoms all the time. So that's going to be in the show notes. And I invite you to start doing that for 3, 4 weeks. And then don't be shy to reach out to me either in the comments or sending me a DM on Instagram at synaptic.sylvie of what themes emerge for you. If you're doing this, you're not in this alone. And if you are curious about the Fire and Rewire program, I do have a link in the show notes as well to the program, what is outlined, and next steps if you want to start. That one is a remote program, so you can do it anywhere in the world. You don't have to have a device. I do offer rental devices, but you can buy your own as well. And the last thing I'll mention too for my friends in Montreal is that if you would like to do a brain activity map, there is a discount if you do a brain training program, but this alone is also a really great tool to figure out how your brain is operating. And it's functional in the sense that you're doing it while you're doing a bunch of different tasks. You can get a great snapshot on the functional map of your brain, and it includes a report. It includes a Zoom call from me unpacking the report, and it's really great to jumpstart your brain training because it makes it a lot more personalized. But I will also include tips, tricks, activities to help increase those brain waves without the EEG device, if that's what you'd like to do. Also, if this episode feels like a lot, I totally get it. And if questions come up, please let me know. I'm happy to do a follow-up episode. I'm happy to answer you individually. It is a lot to take in, this idea that our core beliefs and some of our core thoughts impact ourselves physically. And it's something that I feel like a lot of teachers say. And I know that they genuinely believe it, but as somebody with a really intense scientific background, when I heard it at first, I was kind of like, okay, well, don't tell me that anger is linked to cancer. That's ridiculous. But as I've gone through my own healing journey, as I've implemented my own practices and have been scanning people's brains and taking them through brain training, it is clear to me that if we don't address that core circuit that is leading, it's leading all of these symptoms in our body related to stress, related to our emotions. If that doesn't budge, nothing will budge. And over time, that can have consequences on our body long term. But the great news is that our brains are incredibly plastic. If you're here listening to this, I know you are next level, and that you feel like something's missing, but you know that you don't want to be sitting on the victim end of it, of being like, woe is me, I've done everything and nothing's working. F it. You're on the side of, I'm putting in effort, it's not working, and I'm going to lean into my curiosity and figure out what this is leading me to, because I know that I have that momentum within me. I know I have a version of myself that is well resourced, that does have special gifts, that does have the capacity to have lots of energy to create, to interact with the world in a positive way, to impact people and bring value in ways that only you can. And so, with that, those are the people that I love to help and support. So don't be shy to ask questions and to grab the free resources below or hop on the waiting list to join the Fire and Rewire program and listen to this episode more than once so that it really sinks in, that your brain really grabs on and understands what that core circuit really means. And I look forward to chatting again with you guys soon, hopefully in my cuter apartment, but if not, we'll just keep going in the microscope room because it's more important to get this information out than the aesthetic of the background. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to chatting again with you soon.